Okay, let's get some reaction from MPs to the cabinet changes now. Is Joe Oliver a good pick for Canada's finance minister? Can he keep Canada's economy on track to balance the books next year? Joining me now from Toronto, Erin O'Toole, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade. Peggy Nash is also in Toronto, and she's the NDP finance critic. And in Regina, Liberal Deputy Leader and a former finance minister himself, Ralph Goodale. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Should point out that we did ask any of the newly minted people to come on the show, and none were available, unfortunately, so we'll let them get up to speed on their portfolios. Peggy Nash, I'll start with you. Those were some pretty strong words from your leader, Tom Mulcair, today. Do you agree that Minister Oliver's appointment is an embarrassment to Canada and that previous comments he's made about First Nations were tinged with racism?
Well, Rosemary, I mean, I want to first of all congratulate Joe Oliver and wish him well in his new portfolio, but he has some challenges ahead of him. This is a minister in his previous portfolio who indicated that he didn't believe that climate change was happening. He said that environmentalists who were opposed to his direction were foreign-funded radicals. So clearly, he wasn't someone who assembled a lot of consensus when he moved forward. So I think that in the finance portfolio, he has to, yes, of course, win the support and credibility of Bay Street, but he's got to win the support and credibility of Canadians. The economy is about the well-being of Canadians, and I think that's going to be one of the challenges, is showing that he can reach out, whether it is to First Nations or to those concerned about the environment, to people concerned about inequality, people concerned about their retirement, or young people getting a start in the job market.
So you don't think he can do that? You don't think he can reach out to people?
I'm saying these are challenges that he has to step up his game to show Canadians that, in fact, he can rise above partisanship and serve in the public good for the benefit of the country, for the benefit, for the economic benefit of Canadians.
Erin O'Toole, I know you want to get in there. Let me go around to Ralph Goodale first, though, and we'll get you to respond to these two. Ralph Goodale, what do you make of the appointment of Joe Oliver to finance?
Well, it seems to be primarily because he will be a yes man for the Prime Minister, follow the Prime Minister's line. Mr. Flaherty's strength, I think, was that he did have an independent bent from time to time, most famously over income splitting. But you need a finance minister who has the ability and the courage to speak truth to power. Obviously, Mr. Oliver will simply do what he's told in that portfolio.
Why do you say that, Mr. Goodale? Why do you say that?
Well, look at the botch up over the CNOOC investment, for example. He did the Prime Minister's bidding on that file. It was mass confusion for a long period of time, and at the end of the day, now foreign investors are saying we don't know what the rules are. It's a totally opaque mess. On Keystone XL, the government refused to, on the Prime Minister's orders, make any convincing case about the environment, and that file has stalled. Where it should have been a relatively easy sell, Mr. Oliver has obviously failed to sell it. So he has a record of, number one, following the Prime Minister's lead rather slavishly, and then secondly, not being very successful in getting his files done. I gather from what he is already on the public record saying, he's in the Prime Minister's corner on income splitting. So there's no independence of thought and real strength in the finance portfolio, and you don't need a Prime Minister and a Minister of Finance who are Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Okay, Erin O'Toole, I'll let you respond to all of that. Is that true that Mr. Oliver is a yes man and he's just going to do what the Prime Minister tells him to do and won't stand up for the things that he believes in?
Well, Rosemary, here, you know, we have opposition parties are always saying let's try and bring better decorum to politics, and this is their welcome to Joe Oliver within the first 6 hours of his job, is Mr. Mulcair's really shameful attack. Joe Oliver is an eminently qualified person and a strong economic mind who will fit perfectly well with our track record on the economy. And I have to give a shout out to Jim Flaherty. He's my neighboring MP, someone I've known for almost 20 years. We're in an enviable position. We will be the only G7 nation to have our budget balanced by next year. We've been on track to do that throughout the recession and post-recession without ever raising taxes, and that's something critical for the Prime Minister. And I know Minister Oliver has that same philosophy, that we can get to balance, we don't raise taxes, and keep our economy strong and make sure there's job creation.
I do understand you want to celebrate him today, and that's okay. But I mean, he has said things that have provoked people in the past. He called environmentalists radicals. I think what Mr. Mulcair was alluding to were comments made at a Vancouver Board of Trade breakfast that were interpreted by First Nations people themselves as being paternalistic. Do you think that he is able to rally Canadians around what this government wants to do around the economy?
I think so, Rosemary. It's important to say that on the natural resources front, Minister Oliver and the Prime Minister knows how important responsible resource development is to Canada. You know, a lot of people will criticize, and there were some unfair criticisms of some projects and some of the pipeline proposals, but all throughout the Minister knew how important those are to jobs and our economy. You know, in many ways, it's those projects, along with other jobs throughout the country, that contribute to our health care and the quality of life we enjoy as Canadians. And so for him, making sure that we had not only responsible resource development, but had access to markets. So the pipeline debate, some of our opposition friends actually went down to Washington and would criticize Canadian job creators and Canadian companies. And that's where the minister would fight through that to make sure we got projects that were good.
I want to get back to the economy, given that that's Mr. Oliver's new job. And we spoke to the former parliamentary budget officer, who obviously didn't have the best of relations with Mr. Flaherty, nor with this government. But all that being said, here's what he says are some of the financial issues that have to be dealt with now in light of the fact that the government is moving fast towards a balanced budget and a surplus. Take a listen.
On military procurement, we can't get the money out the door. We still have these, these big bills to come. We got to replace planes and ships and land vehicles. Again, we need healthcare discussions, environmental discussions. So those issues are still ahead of us. They're not behind us.
Let me go around with everybody. Aaron O'Toole, will Minister Oliver make decisions on how the surplus is spent, or are those decisions going to come primarily from the Prime Minister and delivered by Minister Oliver?
I think the Prime Minister and our entire caucus talk about a prudent approach to this. Our plan was always to get back to balance by 2015 and to do that without raising taxes, then to offer some tax relief for Canadian families, and to invest in infrastructure in some other strategic areas. The one thing we have to be careful not to do, because even economic news yesterday showed that we could be in a period of growth, but low and sort of stable, steady growth. We can't go back to the old ways of wildly topping up all budgets and spending recklessly. We've got to do this prudently and do it in our strategic interest. And I think Minister Oliver has the same approach the Prime Minister does, which is we've got to focus on job creation, making sure Canadians have jobs, keep taxes low on seniors and families, and grow our trade relationships like we've been doing.
Peggy Nash and Ralph Goodell. Peggy Nash, you're first.
Well, clearly this country has significant economic challenges. Take procurement. Kevin Page just raised that. Our procurement process has been an absolute, unmitigated disaster. And the fact that we have not been able to spend our money on procurement was part of getting back to balance here, because that money went unspent. We have healthcare challenges that have gone unaddressed, and families have record high debt, our productivity is low, our exports are at record low. So we have major challenges, and the economy is underperforming, it is stagnating. We have big challenges as an economy, and yes, Bay Street is critical, our banking and financial system is critical to our economy, but we have to look at the economic well-being of all Canadians. And when our young people have double-digit unemployment and they're not able to get a start in the job market, and families are struggling, middle-class families are struggling. And the only other thing I want to say, Rosemary, is that the notion of social license, many of our exporters are very concerned that partly because of our reputation on natural resources, that they haven't had the social license, whether it is on the environment, our relationship with First Nations. And that's why I say that Minister Oliver will have to step up his game in terms of building those relationships and building the confidence of Canadians.
Right. Okay. Ralph Goodale, as someone that had the job as finance minister, how important is it to be able to say to the Prime Minister, and did you ever do that? I'm not okay with this idea. Let's go a different way.
Yes, in fact, I did.
Yeah.
Those conversations, of course, are always private, but the finance minister does have to have the strength and the fortitude to be able to do that. And my worry is that we haven't seen that kind of a track record from Mr. Oliver. I think one of the first things he would want to do is to actually verify the finances that he's being handed by his predecessor, because contrary to what Aaron said a few moments ago, in fact, this government has increased taxes, the overall tax burden on Canadians, in each of the last 4 years. And the most notable one being the EI payroll tax by some $3.6 billion. And it's because of EI payroll taxes and deferring defense procurement and deferring infrastructure and asset sales, all one-off transactions, that they're going to be able to claim a balanced budget next year. All of those are building your surplus on quicksand. What you need if you want long-term fiscal security and long-term prosperity for the country, you have to invest in growth, like infrastructure and post-secondary education and science and technology, which this government has failed to do.
Okay, I want to do a quick go-round, if I can, and I do mean quick, on Greg Rickford. He moved from a Minister of State for Science and Technology to replace Minister Oliver at Natural Resources. His biggest challenge, Aaron O'Toole, I guess, is obviously Keystone. It's something that Minister Oliver pushed aggressively, but didn't really get as far as he wanted. I think that's fair to say. Do you think that Mr. Rickford can push this decision in favor of the Canadian government?
I think Greg Rickford's an excellent choice. You know, he's a smart mind from Northern Ontario. He knows resource development, he knows the Ring of Fire here in Northern Ontario. He knows it in Western Canada. He's also someone that's been a nurse and a lawyer in the North, including for First Nations in the North. So I think he's going to bring a fresh approach and a unique perspective with forging partnerships with a whole range of groups, going to the social license that Peggy talked about. And I think it's going to remain a top priority. So the Keystone project in particular has been a priority for the Prime Minister, Foreign Affairs Minister, and I think you'll see Minister Rickford continue on that. And I think for Ralph, I have to address, you know, procurement. We're still dealing with the problems of the Liberals bartering for our subs that are still not working, and promising to cut the GST. So their credibility is zero. We're doing action.
You've been the government for 8 years and you've done nothing. Okay,
Peggy Nash, do you think Mr. Rickford, because of his previous relationship with First Nations and that kind of thing, maybe he can get things moving, whether it be Northern Gateway or Keystone?
Well, I hope he can. I hope he can do better, and truly bring environmental credibility and credibility to negotiations with First Nations, starting with an inquiry into the missing and murdered women, which is a shameful situation here in Canada. And I think it begins by strengthening our environmental regulation. It's not just a PR exercise. Social license comes from actually doing the work. But I do look at the science and technology file where we've had scientists muzzled, we've had layoffs, we've had projects cancelled. And I know the scientific community, the community of government science, is one that we should be fostering, and instead there's serious concern about the track record of this government. So it doesn't bode well, is what I would say.
And Ed Holder taking over the role of Minister of State for Science and Technology. Last word to you, Ralph Goodale, on Mr. Rickford's appointment.
Well, he's got a big job ahead of him because the government has left the wrong message when it comes to Keystone XL. They've left the message to the Americans, who are now trying to decide whether they'll say yes or no. The message coming from this government to the Americans is the environment doesn't matter. Aboriginal people don't matter. Mr. Rickford has to change that message in order to gain credibility on Aboriginal issues and environmental issues, and therefore make it easier for President Obama to make the right decision.
Okay, thank you all for the lively debate. Appreciate you all weighing in. Aaron O'Toole, Peggy Nash, Ralph Goodale, and the last two of you came back 2 days in a row. So thanks extra for you for doing that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary.
Okay, bye-bye.
All the best.